The morning air was crisp and dry, heavy with the scent of sun-baked earth and sage. The Texas plains stretched endlessly in all directions, golden green waves shimmering under the first rays of dawn. A single rider moved through the quiet, a tall man on a powerful black stallion, his shadow long across the dirt road. Grant Hollister didn't rush. He never did. When you owned half the land you could see, you learned patience, patience and power. He sat straight in the saddle, his broad shoulders squared beneath a dark wool coat. The brim of his hat threw a shadow across a hard, sun-tanned face that had forgotten the softness of youth. His eyes, pale gray as storm clouds, scanned the horizon with the same cold calculation he used when balancing ledgers or negotiating cattle prices. Grant Hollister was not a cruel man by his own reckoning. He simply believed in order, in debts paid, in promises kept. The land, the markets, even the sky itself bowed to men who understood the price of things. And this morning, he rode to collect what was owed. Inside his saddlebag lay a folded paper, a contract signed by Samuel McCready 2 years ago, witnessed by 3 men and sealed by the county clerk. Samuel had borrowed to save his ranch, to keep his cattle fed through a drought that swallowed whole herds and ruined good men. But the drought had won, as droughts always do. Then pneumonia had come and taken Samuel too, leaving behind a widow and a pile of unpaid promises. The McCready Ranch lay just beyond the ridge, a place Grant hadn't visited in years. He remembered Samuel, honest, proud, a man who'd stood tall even when the odds bent him low. But business didn't bend for friendship. Grant had waited through the burial, the mourning, and the turning of 2 seasons. Now the time for patience was over. When he crested the final hill, the homestead came into view, a sagging barn, its red paint bleached to gray, and a small clapboard house squatting in the middle of dusty acres. The fences were broken in places, posts leaning like tired old men. What cattle remained were thin, ribs visible even from a distance. The fields, once green, were now a patchwork of dry stalks and weeds. Grant slowed his horse and dismounted, boots crunching on brittle soil. He looped the reins over a fence post, noting the cracked leather and rusted nails. Every detail told the same story: struggle, abandonment, slow decay. As he approached the porch, he caught the faintest sounds from inside: a child coughing, the creak of a rocking chair, and somewhere deeper in the house, the soft whimper of an infant. The smell of bread, coarse, homemade, drifted through the air. He reached the steps and knocked twice. The door opened halfway, and a young woman stood there. For a heartbeat, Grant forgot the words he meant to say. She wasn't what he expected, not some broken figure of grief, but something quieter and stronger. She was barefoot, her faded blue dress mended at the seams, her brown hair pulled back loosely beneath a kerchief. There was a softness in her face that hardship hadn't yet erased, though the shadows under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights. "Mr. Hollister," she said, her voice steady, though it trembled at the edges. "I was wondering when you'd come." Grant removed his hat. "Mrs. McCready," he said evenly. "I'm here about the debt your husband owed." "I know." Her gaze didn't flinch. "I found the papers in his desk after he passed." He nodded once. "Then you know the terms." Behind her, a boy of about 6 peeked out from behind her skirt, his face smudged with dirt. 2 more children sat on the floor inside, playing silently with wooden blocks, too still for children their age. Somewhere behind them came a weak cry, the sound of a baby waking. "I can't pay you," she said softly. "There's nothing left. I sold what little we had to bury Samuel and feed the children. The fields won't grow, the well's gone shallow. I've written to my brother in Abilene, but he hasn't the means either." Grant's jaw tightened. He looked past her shoulder into the dim room, taking in every detail: the patched curtains, the threadbare rug, the old cradle near the fire. A pile of laundry waited in a tin basin by the wall, and a kettle hissed quietly on the stove. He had seen poverty before. It was common as dust out here. But this was different. This was dignity standing inside ruin. "The law's clear, Mrs. McCready," he said finally. "The ranch and stock were pledged as collateral. I have the right to seize the property." She didn't cry, didn't plead, only held his gaze, her eyes shimmering with a quiet kind of pride. "Then you do what you must," she said. "But please, don't make us leave today." "Not yet. The baby's sick. I need a few more days." Her voice caught on that last word, days. It wasn't defiance. It was exhaustion, thin as paper. Grant's throat felt dry. He glanced again toward the cradle, where the baby's cry had grown weaker, softer, like a small flame fighting wind. He thought of his own mother, long gone, who'd held him through winters no one should have survived. She had eyes like this woman, tired but unbroken. He cleared his throat. "I'll give you time to settle your affairs," he said quietly. "But you can't stay here forever. You understand that?" "Yes, sir." She nodded, her hand gripping the doorframe for balance. One of the older boys tugged at her dress. "Mama, I'm hungry," he whispered. She crouched down, smoothing his hair. "In a minute, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice gentling. She rose again, turning back to Grant. "Would you like some coffee, Mr. Hollister? It's not much, but—" He shook his head. "No, I won't take what you can't spare." The silence stretched between them. Outside, the wind sighed through the dry grass, carrying the faint creak of the windmill. A hawk circled far above, patient and watchful. Grant adjusted his hat and stepped back off the porch. "You've got until sundown tomorrow," he said, his tone softer now. "I'll return then, and we'll talk again." She nodded once, relief flickering in her tired face. "Thank you, sir." As he mounted his horse, the smallest child toddled out the door, clutching a ragged doll. The woman hurried to scoop her up, whispering something tender as the baby's head fell against her shoulder. Grant watched them for a long moment, the widow, the children, the worn house that somehow still stood. Then he turned his horse toward the ridge and rode away, though every hoofbeat seemed to echo something hollow in his chest. By the time he reached the top of the hill, he looked back once more. The house was small against the vast plain, a fragile thing holding out against everything that wanted to break it. Grant Hollister, the richest man for 50 miles, had come to collect a debt. But as he stared down at that lonely home, he began to wonder if some debts weren't meant to be paid in silver and land, but in something far rarer, something he'd almost forgotten how to give. The sky bled into orange and violet as evening crept over the plains, painting the horizon in soft fire. Grant Hollister rode slowly back toward the McCready Ranch, his stallion's hooves stirring up long shadows in the dust. The land was quiet now, too quiet. Even the crickets had gone still, as though the whole prairie was holding its breath. All day, he'd tried to focus on work at his own spread, the men mending fences, the ledgers waiting on his desk, but the image of the widow and her 5 children kept pressing into his thoughts like a thorn that wouldn't come out. The baby's thin cry, the children's hollow cheeks, the quiet way she'd said, "You can take the land, but don't take their home." He'd known loss before. Years ago, a fever had taken his wife and unborn son. He'd buried his heart with them and built his fortune over their graves, one deal, 1 acre, 1 wall of stone at a time. But something about that woman's steady eyes had cracked through the wall. She wasn't begging. She wasn't broken. She was just holding on with what little she had left, and that did something to him he hadn't expected. By the time he reached the house, the last light of day flickered across the windows. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, carrying the smell of cornbread and stew. Laughter, soft, faint, but real, drifted into the cooling air. Grant dismounted and stood for a moment by the porch, listening. He could hear the rhythm of small feet moving inside, the scrape of a chair, the quiet hum of a lullaby. For a man who had spent years surrounded by silence, it was almost music. He knocked gently on the door. It opened, and there she was again, Lydia McCready, her sleeves rolled up, her hair loose from its tie. Her cheeks were flushed from the firelight, and though her dress was as faded as before, there was something different about her tonight. A spark of life, maybe. Or just the reflection of hope. "Mr. Hollister," she said, surprised. "You came back." "I said I would," he replied, removing his hat. "You're early." He gave a faint shrug. "Didn't have much appetite for supper at home." Her lips curved just barely. "Well, we don't have much to offer, but you're welcome to share what we've got." Inside, the children sat around the table, 4 of them now, while the baby slept in a small cradle by the hearth. They looked up wide-eyed at the stranger filling their doorway. Grant nodded to them awkwardly. The oldest boy straightened his back, like he'd seen his father do, and said, "Evenin', sir." "Evenin'," Grant said, a little caught off guard. Lydia motioned toward the table. "Sit, please." The meal was simple: bean stew, a pan of cornbread, a pot of black coffee. Grant had eaten finer food at the governor's table, but none of it had ever smelled this honest. He sat while the children whispered between bites, stealing shy glances at him. He tried to speak lightly. You've kept them fed. That's no small feat. Her smile was thin but warm. We get by. The land gives what it can, and I barter with the neighbors when there's something to trade. I make soap sometimes. Or mend clothes. You're managing all this alone. She nodded. Since Samuel passed, yes. Her voice faltered on his name, and Grant's chest tightened. After the children finished, she sent them to bed with soft words and a kiss on each forehead. Then she poured 2 cups of coffee and sat across from him. The lamplight flickered across her tired face, catching the gold flecks in her hazel eyes. He took a slow sip, set the cup down, and finally spoke what he'd come to say. Mrs. McCready, he began, his voice low and even, I came to take this land. That was my intent, but I've thought about it long and hard. And I don't see the sense in breaking a home that's already hanging by a thread. Her eyes widened, confusion and disbelief warring on her face. I can't pay you, she said quickly. Not now, not soon. I'm not asking you to, he interrupted gently. At least not in the way you think. He leaned back, folding his hands together. Here's what I propose. I'll hold the deed. You stay. You work the land as part of my ranch. I'll send men to repair the fences and bring proper seed and stock. You'll keep a fair share of the profit from whatever's grown or raised here. That will go toward the debt. The rest, he paused, then softened his tone, the rest will go to feeding those children. Lydia's lips parted, but no words came. She stared at him as if trying to understand whether this was real or some cruel trick of mercy. You'd let us stay, she whispered. Yes, if you're willing to work. Her hands trembled as she brushed a stray curl from her face. Mr. Hollister, I'd work till my bones give out if it meant keeping this roof over them. He nodded once, the faintest hint of a smile tugging at his mouth. Then we have an agreement. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The crackle of the fire filled the quiet space between them. Grant's eyes fell to her hands, calloused, red, rough from washing and labor. Yet when she reached across the table to shake his, her grip was steady. Thank you, she said softly. The words hit him harder than they should have. No one had thanked Grant Hollister in years. People feared him, respected him, obeyed him, but no one thanked him. He cleared his throat and rose, setting his hat back on. I'll have my men come at first light tomorrow. Fences need fixing before the next storm. Till then, keep the doors locked. Coyotes they've been prowling close lately. I will, she said. And, I'll have breakfast ready if you come by. He paused in the doorway. You don't owe me that. I know. But I want to. Her smile was small and tired, but real. It struck him deeper than he liked. He nodded, touched his hat, and stepped out into the night. The air was cool, filled with the soft chorus of crickets and frogs. Behind him, the window glowed warm, a golden square in the darkness. Inside, he could hear the faint hum of her voice, singing, maybe, to the baby in the cradle. Grant stood by his horse, looking back at the house for a long while. It was nothing grand, just wood and nails, leaning against time, but for the first time in years, it felt like he'd seen something pure, something worth saving. As he mounted up and rode toward the open plain, the stars began to spill across the sky like scattered silver. The land stretched endless before him, but it didn't feel as empty as it had that morning. Maybe, he thought, some debts weren't meant to be collected at all. Maybe they were meant to be repaid in kindness, in second chances. And for the first time in a decade, Grant Hollister felt that maybe life, like the land, could still grow something good, if only you were willing to tend it again.